I'm here today to interview Lance Pritchard, who wrote a fascinating citizen historian account of Hume and Hovell's historic trek into southern Victoria in 1824-25. Lance, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me about your professional background.
I have an engineering background. Around 40 years ago, actually, I joined the Werribee District Historical Society, and that's where my interest in history developed.
So this is Lance's citizen historian book, Hume and Hovell's Expedition Termination, the second edition. And Lance, tell me what made you want to write your book.
Well, I visited the State Library of Victoria. They have a display called The Changing Face of Victoria. This display, they change every 12 months, but the year that I went in there was 2018. They had this very old book from their rare book collection that had a fold-out map. The map showed to me that this expedition did not terminate, as I've always believed, down at Corio Bay or even Geelong.
So we're talking about southern Victoria, which is an eastern state in Australia during the early settlement of this region.
Yes, that's right, down the coast on the west side of Port Phillip.
So you noticed this anomaly in the maps that you were seeing and in the narrative that accompanied them.
Yes, when I looked at who produced these books, the authors were Hume and Hovell, and the editor was a man by the name of Dr. William Bland.
So, Lance, tell me a little bit more about Hume and Hovell.
Hume was a bushman, very good bush skills, and Hovell was a former merchant navy captain. He was chosen for his navigational skills, whereas Hume was there to support the journey. They had 2 wagons, 5 oxen, one as a lead oxen and 2 pulling each wagon. They had the support of 6 convicts, of course food for a couple of months. And I believe neither of them could have achieved what they did without each other.
And why did Hume and Hovell undertake this trek?
Governor Sir Thomas Brisbane, he was wanting to know what was further inland over the Great Dividing Range. Could it be opened up for farming? There was always the question of where the rivers that flowed off the western side of the Great Dividing Range, did they flow into a large inland sea? None of this was known. This was 11 years before Melbourne was even founded by Batman.
Kind of like a reconnoitre?
Yes, well, the expedition wasn't particularly supported well financially by the government. Both Hume and Hovell virtually shared the costs of setting out on this expedition.
What could they get out of it, or why would they bankroll it themselves?
I believe it was basically just wanting to know, just the unknown. They ended up both receiving a land grant. They might have had an inkling that might have happened when they returned.
So, Lance, can you summarise the accepted history, the conventional history of the Hume and Hovell expedition?
What the narrative has been up till now has been that they terminated down near what is now Geelong, at virtually the head of Corio Bay.
Pulled by a bullock team. How fast can a bullock team go, Lance?
They walk at a slower rate than what a human will walk. So the estimating of the distances over the last 3 days has got to be a little bit doubtful. Now, I say the last 3 days is because although Hovell was able to very accurately describe the route taken by way of compass bearings and measurements, and every time he changed direction, he would note that change in direction and then the distance travelled. He was keeping a close track of where their location was. They had a contraption called an odometer, and it was virtually like a wheelbarrow. It was called Claude's wheelbarrow, actually, and it collapsed. After crossing the range, the distance had to be estimated, but I believe he did a very good job of estimating the distances.
Because of his training as a naval navigator.
Yes, and also I imagine the experience of travelling for 2 months, they would both be pretty good at judging how far they had travelled each day.
If you're enjoying what you're experiencing right now, do like and subscribe and comment on this channel. So Lance, what general kinds of historical anomalies did you notice between the accepted historical narrative of Hume and Hovell's expedition and some of the discrepancies that you were finding from your own initial research?
Well, I was finding that bearings taken by Hovell were not what has been presented.
Are there any other types of anomalies that you are starting to notice in your initial research between the accepted history and what you were discovering in the original historical notes from the expedition?
A few very important points. One is the sighting of a river, which ended up to be the Yarra River. Now, this has never been broached by any researcher. Another thing is hilltops that researchers say are visible when they're not visible. One being a view of Mount Cowley, which is 11 kilometres past Lorne. Now, Lorne is along the Great Ocean Road. Now, they could never have seen Mount Cowley from anywhere at Corio Bay, simply because the hills around the back of Geelong, which are in the Highton area, now there's a reason for them being named Highton, is because those hills actually block out the view of Mount Cowley anyway.
You could prove this conclusively in your book.
I did many trips around Port Phillip Bay, taking photographs of observations. And of course, yes, you can't see Mount Cowley. On their return journey, they give bearings of hilltops which match up for Mount Dandenong and One Tree Hill. Now, those two hills at the bearings quoted, there are no other two hills that you can sight from the western side of Port Phillip to the eastern side.
So you physically checked the historical record by going out there to the precise locations indicated, taking a visual look at what you are seeing in front of you, and then looking at the map and the narrative and saying, hey, these don't match.
That's right. And also sighting them up with a directional compass so that I could see exactly the angles. After going into the State Library and citing this map that I decided I better research, I produced a PowerPoint presentation on my initial findings. And this is the first edition of the book, which the State Library asked me to write.
And this map that you're talking about, Lance, is the critical piece, one of the many that you show in your second edition, that shows a clear disparity between the actual maps and recorded journey that both travellers were taken and the accepted historical narrative.
This is an enlargement of the map, and it clearly shows that it terminated at a river before the You Yangs and not at Corio Bay or at Geelong.
And this was an original map that was sketched by Hovell during the expedition?
No, this would have been redrawn from Hovell's material, and this is what was published in the book by William Bland, which was 6 years after the expedition.
And William Bland was acting as an editor for this earlier publication, using direct notes and maps that Hume and Hovell made at the time of their journey.
Yes, Bland specifically detailed that he worked from all of the material from the expedition, and his reason for writing the book was that so that people in the future could follow the route.
You included many scans of original journal entries and original historical evidence in your book so that your readers can make up their own mind.
Yes, well, that's right. I have transcribed all the main relevant days, the last 3 days of the journey before they reached Port Phillip, and the 4 days of the return journey, which other historians have not really examined.
So, Lance, after you wrote and published the second edition of your book, what has been the response from mainstream academic historians in Victoria?
Well, originally I requested that the Royal Historical Society perform a peer review of my book. The reply from that was virtually that that was not their function. I then travelled to Canberra. I joined the Australian-New Zealand Map Society to discuss with them if they would do a peer review. Eventually, a peer review was published, and it was performed by a former president of the Royal Historical Society, who was obviously a member of the Australian-New Zealand Map Society. Now, this review does not criticise one of the points that I put forward.
Here's a citizen historian who's noticed anomalies in the historical narrative and does his own research and substantiates his claims. Have your views of history changed as a result of your experience writing and releasing this book?
Well, the only thing that has changed, I suppose, is that we cannot trust everything that has been written. What has, I suppose, been a little bit surprising to me, it's been extremely difficult to have anything corrected.
You've been an active historical writer with several other publications about the history of Victoria during those early days. Can you walk us down the path, the publication path that you've taken to get to the current book that we're talking about today?
I've been a co-author of several books, like Werribee the First 100 Years, Snippets of Wyndham, and Heritage Sites in the Truganina Tarneet area.
So Lance, can you tell us where people can get a hold of your second edition, Hume and Hovell Expedition Termination?
They can jump on my website, which is Hume Hovell Expedition, or all one word, .com. HumeHovellExpedition.com, and I can be contacted through that website.
Well, Lance, thank you so much for your time today, and I urge you folks to check out Lance Pritchard's Hume and Hovell Expedition Termination, a pioneering citizen historian work. Thank you, Lance.
Thanks very much.